Welcome to the Legal Giants Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Newsum, attorney. With me is co-host
Andrew Sexton, and this is Legal Giants, where the issues are real and the advice is not legal advice.
We're actually going to tackle what we believe are the giant legal issues of our time, and we're going to try to break them down into small little bite-sized pieces so even highly educated lawyers like yourselves can digest the information being given to you.
And like I said, the advice is not legal advice. Make that very clear.
Yeah, no, if you want legal advice, you need to call a lawyer at a law firm and sign a contract. That's what I would suggest. My phone number is 619-876-6000. I practice here in the San Diego area.
Do not call him. Do not call him unless you want a world of hurt. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, actually, technically, I by and large, I started my career as a defense attorney here in the San Diego area. By trade, I spend the majority of my time now when I'm not podcasting, doing business and trial consulting when I'm not litigating. So actually, I work with law firms, both younger and more developed attorneys, and how to effectively market their law firm and capture both their time and their leads. But again, this is not what we're here to talk about today. Actually, we're going to talk about some interesting things. I'm going to cover a little bit about COVID because we haven't got enough of that going around, right?
Not enough, or too much. Or too much. And just to tag off what you just said too, we got a defense attorney sitting over here and an applicant attorney or plaintiff's attorney sitting over here. So you're going to get both sides of these equations in this podcast. You're going to see the thinking on both sides. We do think a little bit different all the time. So you will get a lot of that. But just a little bit of my background. I do a lot of workers' compensation, a little bit of personal injury, estate planning and bankruptcy. But we've been doing the workers' comp and personal injury at our firm, who I work with my father for over 30 years. So definitely got some backbone in the industry, and some good examples of what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't be here hanging out with you otherwise. I know the Sextons, and a good law firm, good people.
Anyway, let's talk about vaccines. So what do you got, Nick?
Before we go to vaccines, I was joking with somebody the other day. Do you remember the Bush era where it just constantly was being moved on television? It was like DEFCON 3, DEFCON 4, according to whatever was going on in Iraq at the time.
Let's see, the Bush era, I was 10 years old. So.
No, not Bush, not Bush Senior, Bush W, as it were, W.
Mr. W.
Yeah, that's during our time.
Mr. W, the SNL W.
Yeah, exactly. W. Yeah, that's right, W.
The Will Ferrell W.
Do you remember the news at the time, though, how it's constantly being moved to DEFCON 4, DEFCON 5? Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, there's always some scare, I believe, every presidency there has to be one. Every president has their, oh gosh, the world's going to end moment.
Well, since we're ticking out of COVID and we've just started Biden, that actually concerns me with that prediction. Sheesh.
So
and I thought I was going to be the dark one.
No, but yes. So what were you going to say?
Well, I just feel like the way we're moving tiers and the way we're like going, even when we started, it was like no masks, then masks, now double masks, and yet
now vaccines.
Yeah, and as vaccines are increasing and everything's opening back up and people aren't necessarily needing to do the social distancing, but we're not seeing this major blow up, but we're still seeing this kind of waver between, oh my goodness, we should all be afraid of our own shadows versus trying to find some normalcy again. I just remember the news times of that, Bush W era where everything was being moved into DEFCON, and I feel like these orange tiers and these yellow tiers. I mean, why can't we just color them something nice like blue and purple or pink, something less fear-invoking than like the yellow and red light orange, analysis that goes on?
Well, fear moves people to act. But I think my question for you is, since you remember the Bush era so well, does this give you a more relaxed tone to what's going on now?
It's funny you say that. It's probably it's considerably less nerve-wracking from a news standpoint, but not from an actual policy standpoint. I mean, if the Patriot Act was disconcerting and a trampling of rights, I think some of the stuff that we've seen here with at least some of the most stringent opinions in regards to COVID and what should or should not be done, especially with like restricting travel intrastate, not even interstate, but intrastate. And I couldn't find any legal support for that. How about you?
What you're bringing up is a good point, because we're not just talking about travel. Now we're talking about all these privacy issues that have resulted from vaccines, Right now, the way I understand it is every state is releasing information differently. But the government, and when I say the government, I'm talking about the federal government, they want everything. Anything they can get on vaccines, they want it. I know for a fact California is only releasing information such as the sex of the person that got the vaccine and their birth date, but other states, more democratic states, may be releasing more information than that. And then it becomes a privacy issue. You know, what are they giving away? And, you know, is someone going to come after me and look to see if I was vaccinated in 20 years? You know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not dogging on vaccines. Vaccines are great. Vaccines are great things to have in a society. We've eliminated some horrible diseases with vaccines.
That's right.
But there's a difference between the vaccine that's out now and the pressure that it's being given to, you know, the vaccine for polio or hepatitis A and B and measles. You know, those are vaccines that have went through the entire clinical trials, passed all the tests. You know, now we're dealing with a vaccine that, yeah, it's been approved, but on an emergency basis. So how do the old laws, you know, that required, you know, vaccinations to go to school apply to this new vaccine that's still on emergency use? And I think a lot of people want to know that. And a lot of employers are confused too on, you know, whether they can require their employees to get vaccines as well.
That's exactly right. I working as a defense attorney and working closely with not only employers but also hospitals. This is a major concern, especially with hospitals, because then you also have that increased risk. So it's something that I've always recommended, especially the more sophisticated businesses that have a lot of employees. You're going to want to reach out to an attorney just to discuss that, because it's way more than what we can cover here, because each employer presents a unique set of circumstances as far as exposures. As you're well aware, I've heard quite a few law firms, and more often, unfortunately, on the applicant side, because of the amount of human traffic that has to come through one of those offices, that's something that is a legitimate concern. And I also want to touch that we're not advocating not getting vaccinated or the viability of these vaccines. We're just rather wanting to put forward some of these larger questions that maybe haven't been asked, right? Like, so for instance, what is the average time for a vaccine to develop? And I actually didn't know that, because vaccines haven't really come up in our life before this. They were
where it's needed, and you know, it's so important that everyone gets it now.
Right.
You know, in the past, you know,
you hold on. You got one in 4th grade. You got your booster. Everybody, right. That's like a rite of passage, right? You have to get a nasty shot when you're in 3rd or 4th grade or something like that, right?
Right, yeah. But that was a clinically approved, gone through the entire FDA process vaccine, where there's been years and years and years and decades of studying it.
An average of 10 to 12 years. That's what it takes. That's from Kroger.com. Is average 10 to 12 years to develop a vaccine. And we're only, I guess if you're using some of the international data, the earliest, I think right now, is September or October of 2019 that some of this stuff was maybe traced back in some passings when they were auditing the deceased at the time. And so that means we're only about a year and a half into knowledge of this virus, let alone, how much time was actually spent testing and developing. And I'm not saying emergency vaccines aren't providing a huge benefit, but there is a concern when you see things like Dr. FAUCI, the head of basically the U.S. Doctor for the entire United States. Also, by the way, people don't know this, he's the #1 individual on the entire planet for gain-of-function research, which is what's entirely necessary. And I think for me, if you're #1 in gain-of-function research and we haven't developed a procedure to contain this kind of stuff, and it's most likely, it looks like from some of the data that I've been reading, that it did most likely develop in a lab from gain-of-function research. And then we have people like this telling us what to do with masks, but we're forgetting about our rights. And what's the point of living life if we were still stuck in quarantine? What if this is still March of 2020 and the request is just stay home continually, pay your taxes? You know, those of you that can work from home, that's fine. But anybody else who's in a service industry or required in person, if you're not essential, you're not essential. C'est la vie, right?
Yeah, and so the essential workers, the big question now is, can they be forced to get the vaccine? That's the big issue item. Can the grocery store workers, the healthcare workers, are they going to be, mandated to get a vaccine that's on emergency use? And, that's the issue. And there's going to be a lot of litigation in the next year, next 2 years, and maybe next decade over whether this is the case, because we don't know when this vaccine is going to be officially, gone through every clinical study. I think they're on children now. I think that's what they're looking at right now. I think they did pregnant women, and I think now they're on children. But I mean, you know, we're talking about an issue that has already come up, the autism. I mean, this was a big debated issue, and there's a lot of science on both sides. And you know, I'm not picking a side here. That's not what I'm here to do today on the autism issue. But you know, if that came up in prior vaccines, you can only imagine what's about to come up in this vaccine, on an emergency use vaccine. So I know in LA there's a big lawsuit. There's a couple teachers, a couple grocery store workers that are filing because their employer wants them to get vaccinated before they can return to work. So, you know, let's talk about requiring that mandate for other vaccines. And they do. They do require, hospitals do require, but there's exceptions. There's exceptions to that rule. There's religious exceptions, there's health exceptions, so that still all applies. But I think the big issue is we're dealing with a vaccine that's on emergency use, and it's not these other types of vaccines that have been approved and gone through the clinical trials.
Well, it's funny because what is your take on that as someone who represents an individual who may be forced to take the vaccine, or even let's take it a step further. Let's say they were forced to actually take the vaccine under duress or something as to that effect, and then they show up at your office and they're, Andrew, I'm having these side effects. What would you do?
Well, I mean, there's a big problem with that because there's protections that have been implemented, especially for this vaccine, that, if you do suffer an injury, you've consented to the vaccine. So you can't sue the government or sue Pfizer or sue Moderna for any injuries you sustained. And it does have a sunset provision. So, after a certain amount of years, that does expire. But if it comes up within, those years, and we'll fact check this, and while he's talking, I'll look up the exact law because it's blanking on me right now. But it's very common that emergency use type medications have this provision where you can't sue the developer of the vaccine or the medication when it's on this type of emergency use basis. Otherwise, the cost of the vaccine would go so high because everyone would be suing the government, everyone would be suing Pfizer. They wouldn't be able to have a reasonable price tag on administering it. So it definitely comes back to a cost-benefit analysis and whether it's good for society. But they do have these protections. And so to answer your question, there's nothing that can be done. If you get sick right now on one of these emergency use vaccines, you're not going to be able to recover.
Let's just say that for my employers that have come to me with some concerns, I have not been so strong in my language because I could see maybe a cunning attorney like yourself thinking that, okay, even though maybe this doesn't have some viability according to these rules, it sure looks like this employer made them do it, and therefore the reaction should be covered by workers' compensation or even worse, some other type of insurance policy because of the...
So the underlying illnesses, and we're going to touch on that. I think the COVID is definitely, the underlying illness, the actual sickness. There's a presumption. We're going to talk on that. But I think the actual side effects of these drugs, I mean, we just brought up an article here. Bring that up again. If you scroll down there, do they actually list the actual law, Nick, of what?
PrEP Act.
So it's under the PrEP Act. What does PrEP stand for? And this was passed recently, right?
No, go back up. Let me read that.
Preparedness Act. The emergency invoked the Public Readiness and Emergency.
So the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act?
It says the 2005 law requires and empowers the HHS Secretary to provide legal protection to companies making or distributing critical medical supplies such as vaccines and treatments unless there's a willful misconduct by the employer.
So willful misconduct.
That is a very, very high standard. But is it willful misconduct without a legal mandate to force an individual back to work to without a vaccine and say no, then otherwise you're unemployed? And that is a question, because for me, especially when you're telling me that there's nobody on the hook for this, that's what I really start to have a problem with. When you have something like Pfizer, who is right now it appears to be the most effective out. Their 2-dose appears to be one of the most mass distributed and the most effective of the COVID vaccines. And they're, I think, one of the largest payers of penalties in regards to pharmaceuticals in the United States of America's history. In fact, in 2009, they paid a $2.3 billion penalty, record-breaking, and it also included a $100 million criminal forfeiture. No, this isn't one of those civil asset forfeitures. This is a criminal forfeiture.
Who is this? Who is this?
This is Pfizer.
Let's tee up that serious Milford right now. So back to what we're talking about. So the Preparedness Act, the PrEP Act, we can't sue Pfizer. But your strategy is here, okay, well, under this emergency vaccine, employer makes you go back to work. You have a side effect because you have to get the vaccine to return to work. That's your livelihood. You got to return to work. Workers' comp case. You're going after the employer now, and they're insured. You're not going after Pfizer. You're going through your workers' comp because it was mandated by your employer. And, that may be, an avenue. That may be what it has to be. But you know what that's going to do? If that starts happening, there goes your premiums out the roof for workers' comp. You may not be able to find workers' comp insurance if that's the case.
Do you know how many of, especially my hospitals, that had to deal with actual COVID outbreaks and everything during this thing? I mean, the premiums are going up whether or not we like it.
Yeah.
So the real question
now,
is
some
whether
of those
or not
hospitals self-insured though.
I mean, I don't want to talk about some of the business aspects. Of
no,
the
we
ones
don't
that
talk
I
about
employ,
your
but
clients.
I will say this, that often what you'll find with hospitals, it's been my experience, because of how their business structure works, they often are permissibly self-insured for the first.
Okay, yeah. So they might not have the premium issue then. But small business, it may eliminate small business.
Well, you still have to have umbrella insurance, and that still has a premium. So don't kid yourself. If you have a bunch of high dollar ones that are starting to click towards that million, they are definitely calculating those and making sure that if you're going to hit a cap, that's one. And that's not everybody. There's other hospitals that do have insurance policies, and I couldn't even imagine what their premium is. It's astronomical.
Yeah. But they may,
$23 million
their
a
umbrella
month.
insurance may be excluded. The workers' comp may be excluded from that umbrella. That's why the workers' comp insurance exists. They want to keep it under one, insurance company, right?
No, that's what I'm saying. Like an excess carrier. Like I'm saying, they would still pay an excess carrier premium, and that's what that's there for when you blow through the first million or whatever.
So these are some of the issues, that they're just unknown, that we think are going to be highly contentious and litigated going forward. And I mean, it's a different story if the vaccine was gone through all the trials and tribulations, but it's on emergency use still. It might be for another 10 years. We don't know.
All right. You know what? And I'm getting nailed from the back here. It looks like they're telling us we got to do a cut for our sponsors. So when we do get back, we generally have a structure where we talk about some things, but we're always going to cover a little bit of workers' compensation and give you some analysis. So we'll be back right after this.
After the break. See you then.
Trusts aren't just for the super rich. It can take a year to probate a modest homeowner's estate, eating 6 to 8% of the estate's value. A trust can speed things up and preserve assets. The Sexton Law Firm.
Outside of making the choice that you want more out of life, nothing's more important than education. The vast majority of what we provide here at Alpha Research is education, and it's my personal belief that education will take you from where you are to where you want to be. I can take this proven program of success and apply it to your situation and help you achieve the same results. But don't take it from me. Take it from our most recent Alpha Research success story.
Nick has helped me a lot with the way that I see myself and the way that my confidence comes true, and motivating me to keep trying to succeed, even though a lot of the time, law school can be very hard on you, but he's always there to encourage me and motivate me and help me out whenever I'm feeling a little bit defeated. I would recommend his program to anyone. I think that Alpha Research is an incredible product, an incredible company. If you're ready to take the next step and become a better version of yourself, Nick is here for you, and he's willing to help you show your true potential to the world.
What you just saw isn't one individual success story after taking our educational success ladder program. The same could happen for you, and all you have to do is take the steps necessary and click the link below.
All right, and we are back, Legal Giants, with your hosts here, Nicholas Newsum and Andrew Sexton. While we were on break, we were watching a little video here of Dr. Hahn before Congress. This is back in September. And, the video is a little misleading because it says that they wouldn't release the vaccine unless they were comfortable giving it to their families. Taking a little out of context, don't you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I just remember that I was stuck inside my home last year, and a gentleman who shares the phonics of my last name, also the governor, was at the is it the French Laundry?
Are you guys related?
No, don't say. I've gotten that. I've gotten that from judges. Please don't blame me. Do not have any conversations at Thanksgiving or Christmas not related.
You didn't attend that dinner that you're talking about?
I was not at the French Laundry. This is not going well for me. Subject change here. No.
But anyway, so we have this appearance before Congress. They're getting ready to authorize emergency use of the vaccine. And he's saying he wouldn't feel comfortable giving it a non-FDA approved vaccine to his family. And, it's just interesting they're saying this at the time because only one clinical trial had been done, according to this appearance in Congress and his testimony. And, it's just now we'd have to fact check this, but I'm kind of curious to actually see how many clinical trials have been done to date on this.
Yeah, that is
compared to how many clinical trials have been done on other vaccines.
Yeah, Nick, you want to look that up for us, see if you can find anything about the number of clinical trials for Pfizer and Moderna.
Pfizer,
for at least
Moderna,
the ones that are still going around. Was it Pfizer, Moderna?
The Johnson vaccine.
Yeah, the Johnson, which although isn't that still shelved, or did they?
No, I think
unshelve it.
They unshelved it.
And see, that concerns me. That one actually concerned me. I don't know. A lot of people don't know this. Johnson & Johnson is an excellently run company with a tremendous background, not just in the stock market, but as a global company that has garnered the respect of consumers. And so, you trust your children with none other than Johnson & Johnson by and large here in America if you're raising a kid, right? That's most of the baby products. And I mean, there's nothing more precious, I think, except for maybe dogs here in California. Dog owners value their dogs more.
Johnson & Johnson's reputation might be going down.
Yeah, no, and I just want to say that after, with all that being said, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the initial data has the lowest positive response for being able to repel COVID-19, and also a lot of people don't know this. That was Johnson & Johnson's first go at a vaccine. I mean, you never buy the first new model of a car, right?
Right. But now wait a second. So you said had the strongest capabilities to repel.
No, not the least strong. They were at 94%, so it's the least effective.
Well, because they're different types of vaccines, right? The Pfizer and the Moderna are an RNA-based vaccine. They go into the cellular structure of your cells, whereas, from my understanding, and I'm no scientist, I don't even consider myself a lawyer sometimes, but the Johnson & Johnson is actually the more traditional type of vaccine. What do you got bringing up over there?
And you know what else I forgot? The AstraZeneca, that was the one that was in Europe, and they also had the same vascular issues that Johnson & Johnson were.
That one was having a big issue. But back to Johnson & Johnson. So before this vaccine problem with them, where they shelved their vaccine, weren't they the same? Is that the same company that had the baby powder lawsuits?
Yes.
So their reputation is a little. It's not so great as it once used to be.
Look, companies go through these ebbs and flows, but
Roundup.
Another little background on me. I'm also the CEO of Alpha Research, was a peak performance and a strategy consulting company that is focused on.
That's perfect timing.
Yeah, it's focused on actually individual. Often we focus on personal financial freedoms or how to maximize your success in your own in particular area. But I say that to say this: one of the main things that I also focus on, I mean, since probably high school, has been stock investments, thanks to just my father and some of my upbringing. And so when you do something like that, you get a little bit better finger on the pulse, as it were, for a company. And Johnson & Johnson, by and large, is a company that acknowledges what their reputation provides for their bottom line. And so they would never knowingly do something. In my humble opinion, it's not one of those bad actor companies. And I'm not going to throw names out there, but we may or may not have talked about a company that just paid a $2.3 billion fine, which also included a $100 million criminal penalty. Right? They may be much better at making vaccines, but that says something to a business structure, right? Than it does for, whether or not Johnson & Johnson is the way to go. But I will say this, that if you've been following the Joe Rogan FAUCI saga for the tit for tat responses that's been going on, Joe Rogan in his response revealed something that was really kind of concerning for me. Because the response from Fauci was something as to the effect of...
It was the selfish response.
for those of you that aren't paying attention, Joe Rogan said something like, if you're young and healthy, you don't necessarily need a vaccine. And Fauci said,
no, that's wrong. The way he's thinking about it is from a selfish standpoint. You know, he didn't refute that. Fauci didn't say, yeah, you know, there's medical reasons why if you're young you need the vaccine. He didn't refute that point of view. He said, no, you're just being a selfish person. And if you weren't a selfish person, you would go get a vaccine.
And I guess the inference is you'd be selfish because you're likely to transmit the virus even if you're not going to suffer the symptoms. If you're not vaccinated, if you are vaccinated, then you apparently won't transmit the virus to somebody, and that was the theory behind it. But Joe Rogan pointed out two things. One, it was that's a completely different conversation, which we'll touch on here in a moment. But the other part was he said he was geared up to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine through Dana White, through the UFC, and when he went to show up to the doctor, because of the scheduling, apparently he wasn't permitted to get the vaccine at that time. It actually had to be in a hospital type scenario. That vaccine was the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and within 24 to 48 hours after that, or a very short amount of time, it's shelved. And I don't know what the follow-up is, but knowing what I know about an individual who I've watched fairly consistently for a number of years and feel like I've started to develop
and listen to
UFC. Listen to UFC, listen to his podcast, that I sincerely doubt that if he did decide to get vaccinated ultimately, that he went and got the Johnson & Johnson. And so I pose this question to you, that if it's so selfish to get to not get a vaccine, but that same vaccine could cause you a personal health problem itself, and we don't even have to have a
then is it
comorbidity.
Truly selfish?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
that's a question.
So you know, as the vaccines become, you know, as they pass more clinical trials and become gold standard FDA approved officially, not the emergency use, you know, it's a different conversation. I think it's a completely different conversation. But you know, all the pressures that are on us now, you know, makes you think. Well, it's going to open up it's going to open a can of worms, which it already has.
Right.
So.
And the pressure. Let me ask you this though: it's like, does it matter whether or not you've had children already or intend to have children in the near future? Because I know they're recommending women who are currently early stage pregnancy maybe shouldn't do a vaccine, right?
See, they say they had a clinical trial on pregnant women. I haven't read it. I'd love to read it, but you know, that's a risky thing. That, you know, a lot of people had babies during the pandemic, but they didn't get the vaccine. So, I mean, now it's a point where, yeah, these studies are going to be closely watched, you know, for these people that got the vaccines while they were pregnant. That would be a small window of time probably. And then for people who got the vaccines prior to ever conceiving or becoming pregnant. So that may be two different case studies that need to be really looked into, because we just don't know. I don't know if you remember the polio. I mean, there were children being born with defects. And that's fact. You can go look that up. So these
as a result of the vaccine.
As a result
of
the vaccine,
okay.
Yeah. So you can go back and look at through history. You know, these are real things that have happened. We just don't want it to repeat. But since we're on this topic, let's get off of vaccines. Let's talk about.
Speaking of selfishness, though, right? You want to talk about selfish in regards to COVID-19. Probably not in regards to vaccines, but there was a news article in Work Comp Central. I think it was February 24, 2021. Title was "School District Worker Accused of Faking COVID-19 Symptoms."
Uh-oh.
That's selfish. I think that's selfish on multiple levels. I mean, we're all scrambling to try to figure out how to do this correctly. We're sitting here trying to tease out some of the more giant issues with regards to vaccines and what that means to you as a as a free citizen, as it were. And then you have this individual here who's gainfully employed during the pandemic, more than we can say for a number of people here in California. And it was out of Baldwin Park, California. And it was a unified school district employee, apparently was seen shopping and traveling, all the while claiming her COVID-19 symptoms were so severe that she could not work.
See, that's just absurd. I mean, at that point, yeah, they need to crack down on that. I mean, what's nice, though, is that there is a presumption in place. And this is where we might disagree on some things. Him being a defense attorney, me being an applicant. But there's a presumption that she is allowed to claim that. However, obviously if they have her on Sombroso footage and videos of her walking around, doing everything she's saying she can't do from her deposition, I mean, if she even had a deposition, she should be prosecuted. Workers' comp fraud is real.
And I would definitely say that qualifies as selfish.
Yes,
right there.
I completely agree with that.
It's not only an affront to her employer and to the system, both legal and her, the workers' compensation system as a whole, but it's really kind of affront to all of us who are trying to take this very seriously. My clients, often I do a lot of defense work in my day-to-day litigation, and a lot of my clients have had to forego the ability to do an in-person deposition, which I assure you from my experience is considerably more effective from a defense standpoint than a video or telephonic deposition. The same can be said for emergency rules in regards to trial here in California. And by the way, we'll cover that in another episode, but I harbor strong beliefs that there was a very small amount of time that the videographic and remote trials should have been permitted, and that the vast majority of the ongoing remote trials is not only not justified with the data that we have now, both between vaccines and transmission, but it's not justified in regards to due process.
Yeah, elaborate a little bit on that, just for the audience.
Here's one major aspect. I don't want to go too much down. This is not really for this one, but a lot of people don't know this, but 85% of all human communication is nonverbal. That's furrowed brows, that's pursed lips, that's little beads of sweat. That I've read jurors that write about whether or not they believe somebody. They said everything came off very authentic, but the fact that they had this sweat just above their, whose lip sweats, as Dave Chappelle once said, right? He had sweat on his lip, right? It's that kind of stuff that it's important. It's very important. It's absolutely vital to understanding whether or not you're telling the truth, the credibility, and the full fact of the matter. And I don't know about you, but I still have to do almost everything via a video camera now.
Or phone. I mean, there's trials that are being held on phone, and you have a voice to go off of.
Yeah. In fact, I'm reminiscent every time I think about nonverbals versus verbals. I remember that scene from Wolf of Wall Street where Leonardo DiCaprio had just gone to that penny stock sales place, and he says, I get 50% if I just sell this. Do you remember that first phone call? Yeah. And he's essentially fake humping the table while doing the voiceover. And the idea is that there was so much more communication. Yeah, here it is. There's so much more communication going on the other side of that telephone that the listener, i.e. defense attorney, judge, applicant attorney, is completely unaware of. And if it's something that the system can't afford, in this case, we were talking about the investigators believe they were able to save approximately $33,516 for the school district. And I assure
insane.
You, if every case that you get,
so let's talk about that.
Go ahead.
Let's break that down. What did you say? $33,000?
$33,516.
Okay, so the majority of that we're probably looking at is what we call temporary total disability, right?
Probably.
Okay, because the treatment-wise, I mean, the cost of treatment for COVID, a lot of it is just staying home until you get better. The vast majority of people, the statistics show, get better. They recover. There is a group that doesn't, but the vast majority does, and the treatment is not very expensive when it comes to COVID for the people who do get better. Obviously, for the people that go into the hospital and stay there for 2 months, which is very common too, for the people that go to the hospital that have severe complications with COVID, they're on the incubators, or what do they call them? The breath.
Respirator.
Respirators. They're on the machines that are pumping oxygen. So yeah, those are going to be some high costs. But this woman, I mean, she was walking around. So where is she getting her money? She's getting it from total temporary disability. Break that down. What is that, Nick? Exactly?
Well, they said she was self-quarantining between July and August of 2020.
But she was getting paid to stay at home and self-quarantine for a claim that wasn't real.
Right. In workers' compensation, depending on your injury, by and large, the vast majority of them fall within a 104-week period when you can potentially receive up to 2/3 of your average weekly wage is
with maximums, right?
Right. There's a
Right.
maximum instituted as there is a minimum. So even if you fall below a certain marker, you might actually get paid more. It's very strange. But anyways, you get up to 104 weeks of this 2/3. So what Andrew is basically saying is that the $33,516 that they believe was saved in a form of not paying this wage continuation, because obviously if you're capable of shopping and traveling, depending on what her job description is, the Department of Insurance and apparently the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office believe that with the video that they saw and the information that they had, they believe this is workers' compensation fraud here. And so yes, I'm not certain, it's not clear, but it definitely looks like, yeah, I guess one of the places she traveled was Lake Havasu. So that's not exactly.
Well, she's either committing workers' comp fraud or she's being reckless with her disease.
Yes, exactly.
So one of the way, either way, something's going on.
and I guess the idea is if the symptoms are so severe that you're not able to do your job and your job description is not so demanding that it's equivalent to shopping and traveling, then there's obviously a material misrepresentation of whether or not your COVID-19 symptoms are actually preventing you from work, or it's your desire to go to Lake Havasu
and party it up.
Yeah,
and
while
infect
receiving
everyone else.
2/3 of your average
your
weekly
pay.
wage. Yeah.
So it's like free vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, which is, you don't have to pay vacation days. It's an odd one there, but let's just say that it's a selfish act. And in times like this, I'm just reminded that there's good people out there trying to make sure things go correct, and this is the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. For the people that are the honest but unfortunate sick person with COVID, what are their rights? What are we looking at here? Let's talk about that. Let's talk about, because it's strange. It's a strange time because with the COVID thing, there's this presumption, that Gavin Newsum put into place that if you contract COVID and you are working, that the presumption is you got it from work and therefore you fall under the workers' compensation umbrella with all the benefits afforded to you. But the issue is too, you still have these delays in accepting a claim, right? The delay is still there, right?
It's a shortened delay with COVID, but yeah, there's still a delay.
Okay.
You're allowed, and you need to, as an employer, do a good faith investigation. That's just something I always convey, because it's not just a smart thing to do to build a defense for your company, which is now being subject to some exposure now. But on top of that, it's a good faith requirement in order to support any potential denial. So not only is it just good from a company standpoint, because then you can figure out things within your own business structure that are potentially exposing you unnecessarily or unwittingly because a supervisory authority or somebody who's in the know was unaware of this particular business practice, which could be minorly altered and make considerably safer for an employee. But then you also have these other COVID concerns with, like he's saying, that for the other side, you need to be able to deny within a certain amount of time. You have to conduct these investigations in a very finite amount of time, or you will have unwittingly already accepted, or the presumption will apply, and then you need to really build a very solid defense if you're in a presumption scenario, or face very harsh repercussions if you attempt to deny a claim without substantial support for it.
So for the honest person that contracts COVID and it's serious, they have to go to the hospital. They may have effects to their body that are long lasting. You do have rights under workers' compensation. You do have all the same benefits according to the same person who maybe hurt his back at work. You get the same, what I call the main four. You get medical treatment, you get temporary benefits to compensate you for wages. You get permanent disability. Now, this could be a tricky one, and we can talk about this one too, because permanent disability with a COVID case, you have to show a long-lasting effect. And with majority of people recovering fully, they may not have any impairment or long-lasting effects to their body that could prevent them from doing future work. So for the majority of COVID people, they may not be entitled to that benefit. And that could be, something that's looked into in the future, just because we don't know what the long-lasting effects are yet. It's such a new disease.
This is true.
So, how does that affect statute of limitation issues? And, being able to reopen a case within 5 years, which you can do in workers' comp, after you stipulate it, for more, impairment or more permanent disability, what if the long-lasting effect doesn't come till 20 years down the road and it's proven, they're outside of that 5-year window. They can't reopen the case. So these are issues that can come up that are just so new that, that you're going to see more and more, but there's no answer right now. There's just no answer.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. It sounds like if I was in a situation, I was an applicant attorney, or if I was somebody who had contracted COVID and was aware, especially some of the literature that was coming out of Germany early on in the 2020, which still hasn't been refuted, is that there is most likely a long-term vascular effect of this disease. And although it presents a little more with comorbidities, that if that's something that's going to come up and you haven't filed a claim and you haven't reserved your rights, that's a concern. Then there's the other part where it's like, okay, how do you properly compensate for permanent disability? Because I could see a COVID claim going through the system, resolving with a 0% STIP, and not having anything for more than 5 years, right? But then it's like, it reminds me of maybe like a mesothelioma case, which I've litigated before, and there's purposely latency periods.
Yeah.
And they purposely allow you to create a new date of injury and say, no, that this is separate.
That could be. And, this could be something that goes to Congress and they, they amend the labor code and, they allow for certain things that weren't there before. So make specific exceptions. We don't know. It's something that's going to have to be thought about. And I tell you what, the insurance companies are going to do what they can to ensure that things stay the same.
Yeah, so let's bash the insurance companies who have to shell out money for COVID-19 fakers. That's right. They're the bad guys.
They won that
in
one for sure. Would you settle that case?
Would I have settled that case?
On the defense side.
On the defense.
You're going to trial. It's 0 or nothing.
Well, once it's prosecuted for fraud with Mitchell v. Golden Eagle Insurance, the WCAB is supposed to suspend proceedings until there's been
a full-on investigation.
A final determination about this other case, because then not only is there an entitlement to benefits issue, but then there's a reimbursement issue, and it doesn't really make sense to allow it to go on. That is if it's in a specific case. Now, of course, if this worker went to another place and then got injured somewhere else, that secondary workers' compensation claim wouldn't necessarily be under the same guise, at least until such time as the proper jurisdiction district attorney's office felt that fraud might also exist in that case and then filed again. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. I think we're getting waved again. I think a few more minutes here, and then we're going to have to go to a commercial break. Anything else you want to say about COVID-19 or vaccines before we click out of here?
I think we dug a big hole.
Yes.
You ready to jump in?
No. We're going to go ahead and cut to break after this, and then we'll close out. Hello, my name is Nicholas Newsum. I am the founding member and managing attorney of NHN Law Offices, a trial consulting and representative firm in the San Diego, California area. When I got first started in the legal field, I understood early on that relationships and connections were as important, if not more important, than understanding the law. I immediately began to amass myself a network of connections of individuals that I thought were not only high quality and worthy individuals, but people who were trustworthy and would get the job done when needed. I have amassed a large network of fellow attorneys, doctors, investigators, and even some fellow judges who I've consulted at times to be able to propone the best arguments for my clients to provide maximum success ratios, even when taking cases to trial. As a result, if you or a loved one is in need of any legal assistance, please reach out to us at NHN Law Offices. We're here to help.
Have you been hurt at work? Struggling with a workers' compensation claim? Dealing with a heartless insurance company? If you're not receiving disability payments or satisfactory medical treatment, or you're unhappy with your attorney, you're not alone. Unfortunately, many injured employees face issues with their workers' compensation case. Don't be overwhelmed. You have rights. The Sexton Law Firm helps injured workers navigate through the workers' compensation maze to maximize their monetary recovery and prevent them from being taken advantage of by insurance companies. James F. Sexton is a former lead attorney for an insurance company. He knows how the other side thinks and the hidden inside secrets insurance companies don't want you to know. The Sexton Law Firm has a no-win, no-fee guarantee. This means that if we don't win your case, you don't pay at all. Call today. Let the Sexton Law Firm get you the benefits you deserve. 619-870-1688.
All right, welcome back to the Legal Giant Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Newsum. With me is Andrew Sexton. All right, so some of the stuff that we talked about here today is vaccines and COVID cases, and so I just want to give a little bit of free advice at the end.
That's not legal advice.
Yeah, exactly. You know, if you want legal advice, you need to actually consult a lawyer for your specific case. That's what we're talking about here, that each case carries with it a specific, unique set of circumstances and facts, and whether or not you fall within these legal exceptions or legal encompassments will depend on the specific facts. But that being said, for my employers, if you're thinking about requiring vaccines before you go back, and you haven't gotten a collective bargaining agreement from a union to agree to sign on and categorize your exposure and had a chance to speak with a lawyer one-on-one with all this, what I would definitely suggest is there's a way to positively encourage, if you deem it a business positive outcome from your company, to encourage the vaccination of your employees without outright requiring it. And then specifically with an incentive, you can ensure that you have a specific disclaimer that you are in no way inheriting the liability or exposure of any long-term or short-term effects of any vaccinations, right? And depending on how you're already set up as a company, make sure that you're following your internal written guidelines, especially if you have a union, make sure you're following those guidelines. And then there's absolutely nothing wrong with positively incentivizing, right? Whether that's a gift card or a vacation day or whatever it is that you want to do as a company, just make sure that you're following proper guidelines. As far as catching COVID-19 fraud cases, just to really touch on that real briefly, my guess is these are going to be few and far between for the most part. But if you have an employee that has recently looked for time off from work but was denied their vacation, and this comes in a contemporaneous time frame, not just the filing, but maybe an increase in symptoms, you're not privileged to outright deny without some good faith cause, but you are privileged to suspect and begin to investigate. And we do have some of the best investigators in the world here in California workers' compensation to catch people just due to the nature of workers' comp and fraudulent workers' comp claims and how you have to actually catch people in the act on camera. And so I would suggest that you reach out to an experienced attorney, if not already in-house one, who can get you connected with one of these experienced investigators. I think Andrew's got some tidbits for the other side here.
Absolutely. I love it. The only thing I would add on to the defense is, when you do encourage and approach the vaccines as an encouragement tool, not a mandate, is, you absolutely don't want to create two classes, right, of people, and then, accidentally or intermittently discriminate against one class because they decided not to get the vaccine.
Right.
So I think that's something to add on there, is just be very careful. Don't offer the people who got vaccines, better hours or better days of working, and give all the graveyard shifts to the people that refuse the vaccine.
No.
So that's just something to think about too. I just thought I'd throw that in there, just looking at it from an applicant point of view or a plaintiff point of view. For the injured worker, I would just say, first, also consult an attorney. Every case is a little bit different. But, if you do truly believe you contracted COVID-19 from work, file a claim. You want to reserve your right. Even if there's no long-lasting residual effects now, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. This is a new virus. It's unknown. You don't want to have these effects later on, in your lungs or in your body. There's so many different symptoms, and never had filed a claim and lose your right to it, lose your, based off of a statute, issue. You don't want to lose your right. So file a claim, and you can still go to work if you file a claim. Just because you file a workers' comp claim doesn't mean you don't go to work. I think a lot of people forget that.
Right. As long as you're following the proper protocols for, if it is a COVID-19 claim, if you're not supposed to go back to work due to transmission and things like that, make sure you're following the legal guidelines. But yeah, there's nothing in the law that says just because you filed a workers' compensation claim that you cannot be at work. It would be based upon your specific medical condition.
Yeah, and the only other thing too is, along with the filing the claim, make sure you have medical documentation. Make sure you got medical evidence. Don't file a claim and then say, oh yeah, I got sick. And then they go, okay, do you have any medical evidence? No, I don't. I just know I got sick. So you want documentation too. And I mean, if you do those two things, I think it's enough to reserve a right, if one's given in the future, to come back after that 5-year period we talked about before. So outside of those two things, I don't think I have much.
No, well, I think that about covers it. I mean, there of course will be more. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Nicholas Newsum.
Andrew Sexton, your host.
And this is what we call the Legal Giant Show. Thank you.
Lady man, wish failure on me. Run for my life until I can't breathe. Trying to be everything that I'm destined to be. And they just trying to take my hype away. Got my mind on my money, that's why I can't.